Good evening.
Hey, Bill. It's getting warm out.
You look more refreshed this week.
I took a quick nap after I got home. There were a bunch of people in my house, and I said they can entertain each other. I went and laid down for like 15 minutes.
Okay. Well, that's good.
So
You're on top of your game tonight.
we covered 51 verses. I know you're shocked, but we covered 51 verses last week. We fought through it. We're going to cover 46 this week, but before we get there, we need a quick recap of what we talked about. Just a quick recap of what we talked about last week in Matthew 24. I know it feels like I'm talking fast, but you'll see why in just a minute. We get this question because the disciples they're kind of overwhelmed, right? They're leaving the Temple Mount, and they're like, check out this building project. Have you seen what's going on here, Jesus? Like, how do they even do this type of work?
Yeah,
And
it
Jesus says,
was pretty exciting but it had been going on for a while. So
hundreds of tons of rock that don't
Right.
have any mortar, that are quarried and stacked together one on the other. And it's like, I don't know how you did that, but it's impressive.
they're fishermen and teenagers. They wouldn't have a clue.
Like, how do you even, well, we don't even know how they did it. But anyway, massive, hundreds of tons, single stones that are laid one next to the other, perfectly quarried, with interlocking, without any mortar at all. Single stones stacked one upon the other that make up the foundation of the Temple Mount. And we don't know how to do it. We can't do it today, but somehow Herod the Great and the people of Israel did it 2,000 years ago.
Yes.
Incredible work. And so Jesus says, you see those stones? There's not one going to be on top of another. And they're like, all right, so what's going to be the sign of the end of the age? And he begins to talk to them about the end of the age and the end and what's about to happen. This thing that's going to be happening. And he says there's going to be rumors of the end. There's going to be rumors. There's going to be false prophets. There's going to be people who say they're the Messiah, but they're not really. And don't believe them. He says that the world is going to go crazy. And there's nothing you can do about it. There's going to be wars and rumors of wars and all of these crazy happenings and earthquakes. And as much as you want to, you can't stop it.
Right.
You're going to have to persevere. You're going to have to endure. You're going to have to be ready. And most importantly, you're going to have to care for God's people. You're going to have to care for those AOWs. I think that sounds a lot like Deuteronomy when he says, remember,
Exactly.
don't forget. Yeah? When all this is done, when you're following God's word and you're doing all of these things, don't forget those people who are less than, those aliens, orphans, and widows, those people who don't have any care for people. And then we transition to chapter 25 that I think we miss a lot of times. And we disconnect the two. But I believe that chapter 24 and that conversation that he had,
Right.
and this chapter 25 are interconnected. Because now we get three parables, and oftentimes you get like parable after parable after parable told from a gospel writer because it's really one parable, but it's told in three parts. This is specifically three distinct parables. So I want to read all of those parables, and then I just want us to surface level talk about them and see if we can understand some things about what's going on, and see how they connect to us. So that we have context for this first one, in the Jewish culture, bride and bridegroom, father of bride and bridegroom agree on a bride price.
Right.
They agree on a marriage.
Right.
They whip out the chalice, pour some wine. This is a new covenant I'm making with you.
Right. The groom presents it to his
Takes
bride to
it.
be.
He sips of it. This is a new covenant. It's just between me and you.
Right.
He takes a sip of it so she knows he's drinking of the cup.
Passes it to her, and she has to accept it. If she doesn't,
Then it's over.
It's over.
But she
No
picks
questions asked.
Correct. But once she picks it up and drinks of it,
Right. She's committed.
she's committed.
And in a lot of in that society, that confirms the marriage right there.
Yes,
Because the bride price has already been set and paid, and the covenant has already been accepted
yes,
and drunk, and so they're married.
they're married. They make the celebration.
Right.
What happens next?
Well,
Groom and dad.
groom and dad have to go and prepare a home, and usually, in every case, it's attached to dad's house.
Yeah.
They just build another room on.
Groom is going to go add on to dad's house.
Right.
As a honeymoon suite.
Right.
Place that's just ours.
Right. And when he approves of the addition,
yeah,
then and only then can the groom go get the bride.
So how long does that take?
As long as it takes.
As long as it takes.
Yeah.
Does anybody know how long it takes?
No, it's all done with the father saying, no, you got to fix this, or no, you got to fix that, or you got to do something more, or
is
it's
that
not complete.
Is that the level of care you're going to give to your marriage?
Yeah, that's right. And
because this is the last shot. This is the last chance for dad to hold son accountable and tell him and show him the standard of care and work and integrity that it takes to lead a family.
Yeah. And without his approval, it doesn't happen. And until that time, you just continue to work.
Right.
Sound familiar?
Sounds real familiar. Yeah. So then what's the bride doing?
She's waiting.
All right. So let's read this first parable. Starting in verse 1.
She's preparing herself. For marriage, or for the consummation of marriage. She's preparing herself with her. I guess she's got a party to plan or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. It better all be ready too, right?
Right.
It has to all be ready. When does it have to be ready?
At a time unknown, because until the father approves and the groom comes to get her.
So once the father approves, days, weeks, months,
years, whatever it takes. If he's not a good builder.
What time is there a specific time of day he's supposed to come into town?
Nope. But he will come in at night and steal the bride.
So he's got a shofar horn.
Right. And
when the horn sounds, you better be ready.
Horn will sound, and you better be ready. And he will come and get you.
So what do we got here? Verse 1, starting in verse 1, going through verse 13 of Matthew chapter 25.
And then shall the kingdom of heaven be likened unto 10 virgins, which took their lamps and went forth to meet the bridegroom. And 5 of them were wise, and 5 were foolish.
Yep.
They that were foolish took their lamps and took no oil with them.
Yep.
But the wise took oil in their vessels with their lamps. While the bridegroom tarried, they all slumbered and slept. Now, see, they're waiting for the bridegroom. He's tarrying. He's waiting.
Yeah, it's taking him a little bit longer.
Yeah.
They thought, he's got to be close to done, and Father said, no, that's not the right pitch for that.
It's like everything else. They were second guessing his abilities.
Yeah.
And at midnight there was a cry made, behold, the bridegroom came, and they went out to meet him. Then all of those virgins arose and trimmed their lamps. Which means they lit their lamps, basically.
Yeah. Got them prepared.
And the foolish said unto the wise, give us your oil, for our lamps are gone out.
Oh, no.
So they've been waiting in the dark, or they're in the dark now.
Yeah.
But the wise answered, saying, not so, because there won't be enough for us and you.
Yep.
But go rather to buy, go those to the oil dealers and buy your own oil.
Yeah.
And when they went to buy, the bridegroom came, and those that were ready went in with him to the marriage, and the door was shut.
Ooh.
You just locked out. Sorry. Afterward came the other virgins, saying, Lord, Lord, open for us. But they got their oil, and they came back. But he answered and said, verily I say unto you, I know you not.
I don't know you.
He's not going to, even though they were invited, even though they had been, if they had been prepared, they would have been in with the party.
Yeah.
Watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour that the Son of Man cometh. Now this is Jesus telling his disciple this.
Yeah.
So he's in that very last verse, he says, you better be ready.
Yeah, because you don't know.
Because you don't know the time. And we just discussed this. You don't know when that room
or
idea. Or that other place that he went to prepare might be ready.
You don't know you don't know, like, you got to have a wedding hall. You got to have everything ready. When the groom shows up, it's time to go.
Mm-hmm. And otherwise, if you're
it's
not
time
ready,
for the celebration.
Come on in. We're locking the door.
If your light, your lamp, everything, you've been wise, you've been taken care of, you're prepared. Because it seems like in chapter 24 we had this statement, because no one knows the hour of the day.
Right.
Not even the son.
It's true.
The groom didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
The groom doesn't even know. Well, it's ready.
Well, it's like
this is good enough.
The disciple asked Jesus, "When will you?" And he says,
"As for times and seasons,
only the
nobody
Father
knows. Not even the Son, not the angels
only.
in heaven, only the Father."
Right. That sounds very, very. Okay, so Paul Harvey, tell us the rest of the story for the first 13 verses.
So, when can they come? Like anytime, right?
Anytime.
Have to be prepared at all times.
Just be ready. Just hang there with your lamp.
Now, the thing that I think is interesting, because I want to go through Peshat on all three of these, and then the thing that I think is interesting in chapter 24, we get a reference to a particular Old Testament character around verse 38. What particular Old Testament character is referenced?
Noah.
What happens in this story? In this parable?
In Noah, or in this
in this parable of the 10 virgins? What happens?
Well, when Noah entered the ark, they had to shut the door.
God shut the door.
All right.
Anybody opening that door?
No. Can't.
When the rains came and the flood started coming up, were there people who wanted in?
Noah waited for the very last minute, and he shut the door. And
is it?
That's it. No more aboard.
What happened here with the virgins?
Same thing.
The ones that were prepared?
Right.
And on the lookout?
Well, they went away to buy oil. When they came back, the door was shut.
The door was shut. It was too late.
And even though they knocked on the door,
the
groom said, "I don't know who you are."
Seems like there's significance in the Noah story too, to me, because who was on the boat with Noah?
His family.
His family. People that he knew.
Right.
People that he knew well.
Well, they followed his work, his commands. He said,
"Yes,
get on board."
You know, I have to imagine in the Noah story, the reason his sons were on the boat is because, like, they were him. Like, in their culture, there was no real separation between the father and the son.
Well, there's no separation even in the family group.
Yeah, there wasn't any separation as far as, like, work and will. It was like it was very honor driven.
Mm-hmm. Well, right? There was one task, one workforce, all working for the same result.
Whatever the mission the father had, that was everybody's mission.
Right.
Whatever vision and religious orientation and spiritual understanding that the father had, that's everybody in the house had it.
Mm-hmm. Well, even in the Jewish culture.
Yeah.
And in that culture, if you failed out of divinity school, you went back and you took up where your father was working. The same thing. Stonecutter, mason. You did what your father did, because he already had the tools. He already had the know-how. He already had the customers. He already had the business built.
Had it all the experience, and
just take over.
He knew all the tricks of the trade.
Right.
He could show them to you. Mm-hmm. He can teach them to you.
Now, we don't know that Noah was a shipbuilder beforehand, but he had all the instructions, and he followed those instructions, and his family followed along with that.
Yeah. So he brings them along.
Right.
Interesting. That's tough. It's a tough kind of conversation, I think.
Well, it's a hard truth that if you're not ready, you're going to be left behind.
Yeah.
You're going to be left out. And that happens time after time.
What did we say last week? We want to be the people who remain. Yes? Like theologically, when it comes to how we read the Bible.
Yeah, we want to be there when Jesus
The
comes.
ones that remain are the ones that live.
Right.
They're the ones that survive, the ones that God draws close. Those are the ones that remain.
Right.
The ones who disappear, the ones who are left outside, not good.
Yeah. And I think that's what that was one of those eye-opening moments, because if you've listened and listened and listened, it's like we said, the chapter 24 gets confused with the end times when it shouldn't be. It should be linked to another book in the Bible.
Yeah.
And
so then we get another one. We get another often used. This is a great story because we use it all the time, but we skip over the one that came before it, and then we just jump to this one, and we kind of use it out of context.
And see, I don't know why you would skip over one, because that has more significant to me, and has more significant bearing to what you need to prepare for.
Mm-hmm.
This one is Jesus is saying, I'm going to give you. Well,
let's see what happens. Yeah. Let's read the story. You want me to read this one?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll read this one. It is starting in verse 14, and it goes through verse 30. So it's a big chunk here. For it will be like a man going on a journey, who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. He who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them and made 5 more talents. So also he who had 2 talents made 2 talents more. But he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Now after a long time, see, we got a long time going on here. Seems like a reoccurring thing.
It took some time to double there.
The master of these servants, it's the rule of 72, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, after a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. And he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing the 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here I have made 5 talents more. And his master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And he also had the 2 talents, came forward, saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents. Here I have made 2 talents more. And his master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. He also who had received the 1 talent came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours. But his master answered him, You wicked and slothful servant. You knew that I reap where I have not sown, and gather where I have scattered no seed. Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming I should have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who had the 10 talents. For to everyone who has will more be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, but the one who has not, even that what he has will be taken away. And cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So what's the first servant get?
Double.
He gets 5 talents, yes?
5 talents.
And the second one?
2 more talents.
And the third one?
Nothing.
He gets 1 talent, yes?
Yeah, he gets, at the beginning, yeah.
So the 5 talent guy adds 5.
Right.
2 talent guy adds 2. And the 1 talent guy just protects his 1 and doesn't add anything.
Doesn't do it. And I was want to add this. In the King James Version, in here it's got a little in fine print, it says that the 5 talents equaled $1,920,000. A talent of gold would at that time, and the 2 talents equaled $768,000.
So it seems like a lot.
Yeah. Well, and in the single talent, $384,000. That's the value of that gold. So the first one rich. Doubled. The second one doubled.
It's not like they don't have anything, right?
Right. Well, he goes away on vacation. He leaves all of his goods to his servants.
So let me ask a question. Is there a significance to the number 5?
In the Bible, yes.
So in the culture, the number 5, in the Jewish culture, the number 5 would represent what? The 5 books of Moses?
Yes, the Pentateuch.
The full Old Testament law.
Right, yeah. Everything that was given to the children.
So it would seem that maybe the first person isn't given as much money as he is a measure of faith and understanding of the scriptures and the law and its application.
Okay.
And because he's invested in it and committed to it, it multiplies in his life.
Right.
And it multiplies his faithfulness to the master, to God. And he comes and he brings back exactly the measure that he was trusted with. Well, some people don't quite get that level of understanding and experience, do they? Some of them just have a basic understanding.
Yeah, well, it's like number 2 is the 2 greatest commandments.
Number 2 would be the 2 tablets.
Okay, the tablets that embodied the law.
It's just the basics of those 10 commandments. Their commitment and understanding is just the basics of the law. I don't understand all the nuances and how it applies and how it challenges us. But I do know to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. To not have any other gods before him. To not steal. To not kill. To not bear false witness. I understand those things. And I'm going to lean into that.
Right.
And I'm going to trust that. I'm going to live by that. I'm going to continue to apply that to my life. I'm going to love my neighbor as myself. I'm not going to covet my neighbor's stuff.
Right. Honor my mother and father.
I'm going to honor my mother and father. And that's all they understood.
So to follow the 10, not necessarily simple, but the 10 rules that were handed down by God at the very beginning.
Yeah, if nothing else, I at least understand the basics of God's law, the basics of his instruction to me. And if I understand those things and dwell on those things and pursue after those things, they multiply in my life. Some people. Yeah. 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 The principle of multiplication is, yes, it is, whether it's basic or expansive. God shows that he's willing to multiply. He's willing to give just as you give to him and trust him. And then there's the 1 talent. 1 typically just represents God. All they know is an understanding of God. Right. Because it seems like this one, I know who you are. I know you reap where you don't sow.
Right.
I know you harvest a multitude. I know you to be a hard taskmaster. Like there's a high standard for you. So what I did to protect myself was I took what you gave me and I hid it. Kept it to myself. I had this understanding that you existed. That's all I did with it.
Yeah, and I know who you are.
I know who you are.
But
yeah.
He had no point. He had no. The result was that his master says, you could have shared that talent with the banker,
Yeah.
given that money, and I would have at least had the interest.
Yeah.
Whatever it was.
Yeah, and who knows how long. Just he was gone for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And
so he lost out completely, and the judgment that he received was to be
cast out. What he had was taken from him.
Right.
Given to the one who had 10.
He was cast out into the outer darkness.
Yeah,
probably
weeping and gnashing of teeth.
Banished from the neighborhood, suppose.
Yeah.
So, all because he didn't have enough faith to share his God, his talent.
Yeah, didn't just lean into what he did know about God and said, well, he reaps where he doesn't sow. So,
and
I've got something.
He's a hard man.
Clearly, this is going to multiply.
Does that show an underlying fear?
Definitely shows a fear. And we're going to come back to this one. I think it's pretty significant. The master's tough. Like, seems kind of out of character for God. Seems pretty harsh. He definitely does say, taste and see that the Lord is good. Yeah, we're like I said, we're gonna come back to this one, but like just the shot level, like what you have, and the reality, it doesn't matter if you have. I would argue that there are people who have a vast understanding that are hiding it and holding on to it and pushing it away or not leaning into it, that they're not showing any increase, and they're going to stand before God and give an account for that.
Right.
At some point. Yeah, so here we go. Let's go to this. Let's go to this next one.
I think the next one is the harder lesson to learn for someone who has actually read chapter 25 of Matthew.
Yeah, this one's tough. Starting in verse 31 through 46. See, I told you we're going to get all the way through there.
Yep. And when the Son of Man comes into his glory and all the holy angels with him, then he will sit upon the throne of his glory. Amen. And before him shall be gathered all nations, and he shall separate them one from another, as a shepherd divides his sheep from the goats.
Huh.
And he shall set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on his left.
Huh.
Then the king shall say unto them on the right hand, Come, ye blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world.
Wow.
For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to see me. Then shall the righteous answer him, saying, Lord, when did we know that you were hungry and feed thee? When were you thirsty and give you a drink? When did we see you as a stranger and took you in, or naked and gave you clothes? Or when did we see you sick or in prison and came to see you?
So, like, I'm going to pause real quick because, like, surely they know what their king looks like.
No.
Surely they know what their master looked like, right?
No.
They know who he is.
No.
Like the sheep know his voice, right?
Right. But they wouldn't necessarily know who the master was.
So confusing. What does the king say? How does the king respond in verse 40?
He said, and the king answered them and said unto them, Verily I say unto you, so inasmuch as you have done it to one of the least of these my brethren, ye have done it to me.
So he's saying, in his kingdom, anybody that's in the kingdom, however you treated them,
you treated me.
You treated me.
Right.
That's how you're treating me, because those are my people. They carry my name.
Right.
They're recognized by me. I'm responsible for their well-being.
Well, adopted to me into my family, by me into my family.
Yeah, so anybody in my kingdom, anybody under my care, if you did the work of caring for them as I would, I'm trusting you and bringing you in.
Right.
But he goes on.
And even though you didn't know it.
Yeah. Well, how did we ever see you? Well, those people carried my name.
Yeah.
What kingdom are you from? I'm from the kingdom of God.
Mm-hmm. Then he should say to them on the left hand, the goats,
Yeah.
depart from me, you cursed, and be cursed into the everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels.
Oh, that's rough.
For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat.
Mm.
I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink.
Mm.
I was a stranger, and you took me in not. Mm. I was naked, and you clothed me not, and in prison, but you did not visit.
Hmm.
Then they shall also answer him, saying, Lord, when we saw you,
when did we see you?
When we saw thee or you as hungry or thirsty, or a stranger or naked or sick in prison, did we not give unto you, minister unto you?
Yeah.
Then he answered and saying, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as you did not for one of the least of these, you did it not for me. And these shall go away into the everlasting punishment, but the righteous into life eternal.
Whew. That seems pretty rough.
That's the truth.
It seems like they're executing judgment.
Right.
We definitely associate this one with judgment.
In their mind, they made the commitment to who they thought deserved it, who they thought needed to be visited, who they thought needed to be closed. So they took it upon themselves to make a choice about who should they visit, who should they clothe, who should they feed, who should they give a drink to.
Yeah.
Even to who should they honor.
Yeah. What happens to the goats in this story?
Cast into outer darkness eventually.
They get condemned in the end?
And everlasting punishment.
And the sheep?
They go to their life eternal.
They get rewarded?
Yes.
Why? There's a word that we use for this type of judgment. What is it? Starts with an M.
Yeah.
Mishpat. Mishpat, really good. You didn't even have to read that.
No.
Right there.
I just need the first letter sometimes.
Yeah. So mishpat. Okay, so remind me of how so in Matthew 24.
Okay.
Said there's gonna be chaos.
Yes.
And there's gonna be all these false messiahs.
Right.
And he says, be ready. Be ready for it.
Because you know not the hour.
So when the groom comes, will we be ready?
We better.
Does that sound like something that happened and was talked about in Matthew 24? Didn't he say to be ready?
Yeah.
He said be ready because you don't know? Don't know the hour of the day? Who knows the hour of the day?
Only the Father.
Only the Father knows. So seems like that was covered in chapter 24.
Yes.
What about giving an account for, like the question is, will we be able, so the 10 virgins says, when will the groom come? When the groom comes, will you be ready?
Right.
Then the parable of the talents, or the 10 minas in the book of Luke, says, will we be able to give an account for what God gave us? And then the third, the sheep and the goats, it says, how do we deal with those in need? Right. Now, in Matthew 24, let's remember, he said the end of the age is coming. They said, how do we know the end of the age is coming? He said it's going to be crazy. Nothing you can do to stop it. You got to be ready.
Right. You got to remain faithful.
Got to be faithful. And he says you're going to have to be able to tell people and share your story with others. You're going to have to persevere. And then he tells them at the end the way to be prepared, since those other people who are supposed to be trusted with it haven't taken care of it. Do the job of the priesthood like it's supposed to be done and take care of God's people.
Right. That's his admonition to the Sadducees and Pharisees, but they haven't taken account They've taken care of themselves, but they haven't taken care of.
But aren't all of those things just covered in these 3 parables?
Yes.
But we pick these things apart and separate them. And Jesus has this admonition. So let's Paul Harvey this thing.
Okay.
Let's go a little deeper. Let's break out our shovels and see if we can track down the rest of the story. So we get the first parable. And that's the parable of the 10 virgins.
Right.
There's a celebration.
Right.
People are getting wed, right?
Right.
And they're committing in marriage, and there's bride and bridegroom and some lamps that are being lit, and who's ready, who's not ready. So let's look in Jeremiah chapter 25, and let's just see how this might connect. Jeremiah 25, starting in verse 8, is where we're going to be. So I'll give you a second to turn over there. Jeremiah is in this space, and they're about to be told of something that's coming, and
25:8.
25:8, okay. Yeah. So 25 verse 8 says, "Therefore thus says the Lord of hosts, because you have not obeyed my words, behold, I will send for all of the tribes of the north, declares the Lord, and for Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, my servant, and I will bring them against this land and its inhabitants, and against all these surrounding nations I will devote them to destruction, and make them a horror, a hissing, and an everlasting desolation. Moreover, I will banish from them the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness, the voice of the bridegroom and the voice of the bride, the grinding of the millstone and the light of the lamp. The whole land shall become a ruin and a waste, and these nations shall serve the king of Babylon 70 years. Then after 70 years are completed, I will punish the king of Babylon and that nation, the land of the Chaldeans, for their iniquity, declares the Lord, making the land an everlasting waste. I will bring upon the land all the words I have uttered against it, everything written in this book, which Jeremiah prophesied against all the nations. For many nations and great kings shall make slaves even of them, and I will recompense them according to their deeds and the work of their hands." Whew. It's tough. Got brides and bridegrooms and lamps. They're all getting shut out. What happened? What does God say in this particular passage about Nebuchadnezzar?
Well, first of all, he calls him a servant.
Ooh. That's always good for the people of God, right? When a pagan king is referenced as a servant of God.
Right. And
really not awesome for the people of God, right?
It's kind of, well, it'd be kind of a shock to say, wait a minute, Nebuchadnezzar, he's our enemy.
Who would you say is being called out in this Jeremiah book here? In this, who's responsible here? Like, well, who's responsible? Is this the whole nation?
No,
like, is everybody?
Just the northern kingdom.
Okay, is everyone in the northern kingdom unfaithful? Like, that's an impossible, right?
You'd think.
If you're taking a test and they're like, which statement is not true? If always or never or like any type of complete statement is in it, it's usually false, right?
Well, it says all the people of Judah.
Oh, wow.
That's a lot of people.
So all the people of Judah, like, I mean, if we're taking this literally, we're going to say all the people of Judah are unfaithful. Is that true?
As it turned out, no.
But
so,
right. So it's not. So if it's not literally true, then who's being called out? If it's all the people of Judah,
well,
all the people
of the
northern
people
kingdom.
That should understand, all of the people that should have listened.
So
to God's word, because He said at the very first verse you wrote, "You have not heard my words."
Huh. what you're saying is that the challenge in this story would be to all the caretakers of the law.
Exactly.
And they haven't led the people in the way that they were supposed to go.
Right.
And since they didn't lead the people in the way that they were supposed to go,
they're going to be enslaved for 70 years.
Who gets anointed to carry them off and destroy their home and take them into captivity?
God's servant Nebuchadnezzar.
Servant, this pagan king.
Right. From far off.
From far off. King of Babylon, yeah. Yes. We're about to get to a very similar story. Shocking. Yeah.
Yep.
It's not yours. Yeah. Yeah. Isn't it crazy? Yeah, God uses this pagan king. What's this pagan king coming to do?
He's going to go to Egypt too.
But this particular story, he says he's going to judge who? Not just the northern kingdom, but all of Judah, right?
Right, all of Judah, yeah.
Is there another foreign king, oppressive force hanging around at the time that Jesus is telling this story? There's a Roman legion.
Yeah, there's
just marched into town earlier in the week, right?
Right.
Because this is Holy Week. Like, this is between.
Okay, you're talking about Jesus' time yet?
Yeah, Jesus physically.
Pontius Pilate is there with his whole cohort, or the whole legion.
You think it's significant in any way, shape, or form?
Nah.
I mean, you think they would connect the dots? We don't connect the dots because we don't understand the history, but
those in positions of authority, not power, but those in positions that are serving supposedly in the temple would understand that this remez is directed at them.
Yeah, they're going to have to think for a minute and pray because, like,
wait a minute. This
seems like he's still knocking on the same door.
Mm-hmm.
If we're talking about, like, he's been doing this.
Imagine all those if they heard this story and then they got together and say, "Hey, wasn't there something in Jeremiah about this?"
Yeah, they went home and they were having this conversation. They're like, "Yeah, remember? What do you think he was talking about?" Well, there is this story in Jeremiah. King Nebuchadnezzar is the. We better kill this guy. You think this? There's some stuff stirring up, right?
Right. That's
like, we better make this guy shut up because, like, this is not good.
Yeah. If the other people of knowledge hear about this story, then they're going to say, "Hey, wait a minute. We don't want to be in exile for 70 years."
So it seems as though Jesus is saying, hey, destruction's come here before because of unfaithfulness.
Right.
Because they haven't been caring for the light.
Mm-hmm. Well, they haven't looked out for the people.
Right, because Psalm says your word is a lamp unto my feet and light unto my path.
They haven't been looking for the people that needed to be cared for.
Yeah, you guys are busy not sharing the news. You're not sharing the word of God. You're not sharing the law.
Well, remember, Jesus told them, "You have made it so difficult."
Oh yeah,
for the underprivileged, the unlearned, to get to the point to come to the temple that you've made it so difficult that even they turn away because they don't understand what you're saying.
Yeah. And he says, destruction's come before by a foreign king. And he's already told them, how did the story open up in 24 after the disciples said, "Wow, have you seen this building project?" Jesus says to them what?
It's going to be all torn down.
Not one stone's going to stay. This is all going to be destroyed. This temple is going to be all destroyed.
And that really had to be confusing to them because they're saying,
it's not even put together yet.
Yeah, how magnificent is it that it is so finely constructed? Who's going to tear it down?
And Jesus is like, well, there's this oppressive king before that God used as his servant to destroy Jerusalem.
Because
it's not a far-fetched connection.
They would know that the temple's been torn down before.
Yeah, it's not a far-fetched connection to say there's another king who's reigning, oppressive, and from a distant land.
Yeah. And it took a long time to be rebuilt.
Yeah. So then we got another. So that's the first one. What about the second one? It seems like the first one still connects with what Jesus was saying in chapter 24.
Right.
And the Peshat connected it. And now this is just deepening the connection, right?
Okay.
And then we get the parable of the talents.
Okay.
And all these things coming on. And I told you we were going to get back to this. And here's why we're going to get back to this one. Was Herod the Great alive during Jesus' life?
No.
So he dies.
Right. It's one of his sons.
So Herod the Great dies, and right. Herod the Great had great influence in Rome.
Exactly. Well, he didn't have as much influence as his money did.
That's right. He didn't have as much influence as his money did. And he had done all of this work to pay homage to Caesar.
Right.
And to gain favor with Caesar. And he did it with money. He bribed him.
Staying in the good graces of Rome, he had to spend money.
Then he dies. He wills the southern portion of his kingdom to Archelaus.
Right.
The central portion of his kingdom to Antipas. And the northern kingdom northern portion of his kingdom to Philip.
Right.
So here's what happens. Those three men send a ship full of gifts and an entourage to go meet with Caesar.
Right.
To make offering to him to try to buy favor, to get granted favor. Well, the Pharisees are in the central part of the kingdom.
Right.
And they are anti a king. Definitely anti Antipas. So they send their own ship. So 4 ships set sail.
Did not know this.
For Rome.
Wait a minute. All 3 of the boys sent a ship?
All 3 of the boys sent a ship.
To show homage. And then the Pharisees sent...
The Pharisees went to plead their case. Of why Antipas wasn't worthy to be called king.
In Jerusalem.
In the...
central part of the kingdom.
Yeah. In the land of the Galilee.
Right.
Caesar listened to them. So Herod Antipas is known as Herod the Tetrarch. Tetrarch is a title for a person in power, has all the responsibilities of a king and leader, but doesn't get the title of king. So we had King Herod. That's Herod the Great. This is Herod the Tetrarch.
Puppet king?
Herod Antipas, a puppet king. He was so angry that when they returned, he killed multitudes. This is where we get the story in the Gospels of Herod has all these babies killed. It happened because he was trying to take their inheritance. All these young men were killed for his protection and his getting back at these people for fighting against him, his display of power. So the master in this particular story that acts so out of character for God is not a representation of God.
Okay.
It is a representation of Herod Antipas. And this connection of this story now And so what is happening here is Jesus is using an old rabbinical tradition, a teaching style called, I've got to read this, Kolvek Omer. Kolvek Omer. It is a greater and lesser. So they typically tell this story and they point this thing out and they use this negative example, a simple negative example that communicates a truth, a universal trait. And then they will follow that up with a statement of how much more than if it was used positively. How much more influence, how much greater a thing will it be if it's used positively, if it's used in the right light? So,
how would it be twisted around? I mean, how would it be turned to a positive?
So, this is because at the end of the parable of the talents,
right,
the unfaithful servant who at least still protected what you gave him was destroyed.
Right, turned away. Everything was taken from him, right?
Everything even taken from him, which seems out of character for God.
Yeah.
But if you turn that around and you say, well, the faithful servant, when you're faithful with what's been trusted to you, it's going to multiply.
Right, even if you give it for interest only.
Yeah, even if you give it for interest only, it's going to multiply. So that's a little bit of background. Now we're going to go over to 2 Kings chapter 22. This was an interesting story. A very unknown story, it seems. 2 Kings, here's 19, 20, 22. Here we go. Seems like we're in the reign of Josiah. Somebody here in the house mentioned this particular story. It's an interesting story because we'll pick it up in verse 3. You want to read it? You want me to read it?
Go ahead.
It says, in the 18th year of King Josiah. Seems like he covered this just a minute ago.
He was 8 years old when he took the throne.
The king sent Shaphan, the son of Azaliah, the son of Meshullam, the secretary to the house of the Lord, saying, go up to Hilkiah, the high priest, that he may count the money that has been brought into the house of the Lord, which the keepers of the threshold have collected from the people. And let it be given into the hand of the workmen who have the oversight of the house of the Lord. And let them give it to the workmen who are at the house of the Lord, repairing the house. That is, to the carpenters and to the builders and to the masons. And let them use it for buying timber and quarried stone to repair the house. Okay, so what's happening here? What's happening here is Josiah has taken over as king. He takes over as king at like 6 years old, yes?
8 years old.
8?
Yeah, he's 8 years old when he began to reign. In verse 4.
And then 18 years later, they're in this cleaning, rebuilding. They've kind of forgotten what happens in the cultural happening, especially in kings. You see an unfaithful king and the temple of God gets dirty and abandoned, and all of those people who are supposed to be operating as priests of that place are going to chase after other gods, and they're building up other high places, and then somebody calls them back to godliness, and they tear down the high places, and they rebuild the temple, and Josiah is in this place. He has been a young king who has seen what is happening, and they begin to tear down the old things. And what happens when a house is just sitting around empty and unused?
Starts to fall apart.
Starts to fall apart. Starts to get dirty. It needs work. It needs tender, loving care, TLC. And it starts with cleaning everything up. And then you start repairing everything, because you got to get to where you have something that you know what's happening, and then you start building this thing back, right? And so this is what Josiah does, and they do exactly what they're supposed to do. They start cleaning everything up. They start being faithful to what God has given them, and they say, hey, bring your tithe and offering into the storehouse. Trust it to God. And when it all gets collected, Josiah sends word to Hilkiah, who's the high priest. What's the high priest supposed to do?
Take care of the people.
He takes care of all the people. All the money, all the offering that comes in, he's responsible for it. And Hilkiah is instructed by the king to hand over all of that money to all of these workers,
right,
who are rebuilding the temple. And he says something crazy. As an accountant and a person who has managed things and managed people and managed projects most of his adult life, would you tell me what verse 7 says?
However, there was no reckoning made with them of the money that was delivered into their hand, because they dealt honestly. Wait a minute. Somebody cooked the books.
So verse 7 says, but no accounting shall be asked from them for the money that is delivered into their hand, for they deal honestly. So every project manager should be squirming just a bit. How many of us willfully have a project, a major project at home, and we're take the money that we're told it's going to cost, and we hand over the money and don't ask how it's being spent, and don't ask for evidence of what's going on, and don't. You understand? Like, doesn't that make you just uneasy?
Sounds like USAID.
Oh.
We don't care how you spend it.
Yeah, just take it.
Because there's no accounting for it.
And what God is saying, and what Josiah is telling Hilkiah, is all those people who are working, doing the work of the Lord to rebuild this temple.
Yeah, they're honest.
We're going to give them what God has entrusted to us.
Right.
And we're not going to have to keep an account.
Is that right?
That's what he did. Sure. Like, if you trust godly people to be godly people,
there you go,
and manage godly things God's way. Do everything. The New Testament says do everything as if you're doing it for the Lord.
Right.
You shouldn't have to. And so, if you're trusted with God's treasure, then being trusted with God's treasure should hold no reason for someone to have to come back and challenge you based on accountability, because you're faithful and you've proven to be faithful. You've proven to be trustworthy.
Okay.
But how is that a remez to the story of the talents? I don't understand.
Well, the first two did with the money, or with the talents given to them, invested it, made it fruitful, and it multiplied. But the last one hid it away.
So, interesting thing happening here in Josiah's time. They have lost the word of God.
Right.
Like, literally cannot find it. They were so unfaithful before Josiah that the book of the law they have misplaced. And they can't find it.
So Sadducees, Pharisees, scribes,
yeah,
all. What happened to that book? I don't know.
That's exactly it. They did eventually happen to find it. In this process, Hilkiah himself, matter of fact, the one who gave over the money and trusts it to these builders, is walking through the temple and finds this random room and finds this book and brings it to Josiah and says, hey, we found this book. And he starts to read it. Like, this is the story. And it starts this revival. But before this time, like at this point, in this particular story, that we connect as a remez, as a reminder from this talents parable, someone's misplaced the book of the law and can't find it and aren't being faithful with it. What is the number 5 again?
The first 5 books of the Bible.
What was the number 2 again? The 2 tablets, yes?
The 2 tablets, yeah, I'm sorry.
What is it that is the most precious thing in the Jewish culture? What's the most precious thing that God has to give? That God has that he can trust us with? It's his word, right?
Right. Well, that's all.
The whole life, like the Pharisee life is centered around that.
Around the word. Well, they spent their entire life understanding the word.
And learning it and
passing it on.
Seems as though Jesus' remez is a confrontation of, hey, if you lean into understanding the law or even a basic understanding of the law, it's going to multiply in you.
Right.
But if all you have is just God, whatever God you make it, you know a little bit about him, but you don't hand it off, it's going to be stripped from you.
Right.
And it seems that the remez is that someone has misplaced the law and can't find it.
Okay.
Who misplaced the law?
I don't know, the last guy that's supposed to have been
the priests,
reading from it, yeah.
And the scribes, and the Pharisees,
the Sadducees, and everybody else that were allowed in. Anybody allowed in the temple may have been the last person to have that book.
What's the chances those people connect the dots?
Oh, sure.
That, hey, you were supposed to be trusted without oversight, and the problem is,
as well as they know with Jeremiah, they wouldn't know kings.
Yeah, they're like, hey, you were trusted with oversight, and you lost the law. So all these other people that are doing the work, trying to share the gospel and share the truth of the word, why are you trying to destroy them?
It comes right back to what Jesus said. You have made it so difficult for them to follow the word and understand the word,
yeah,
and seek the truth.
Doesn't he? There's some people who claim to be messiahs, be false prophets and false teachers and false messiahs. Don't listen to them.
Yeah. Of course, you know, in a time of Josiah, in time of the kings there, in the time of these workers, there may have been, well, if these priests and scribes had been out building other gods up,
yeah,
and proclaiming them as all powerful, the gods of Baal,
yeah,
that at that point, those were the false gods that he's talking about in chapter 24.
Yeah,
of Matthew, is that you've been following these false teachers, even though they were ordained to be priests in my temple. Mm-hmm. You've been following them down a path to what would result in your destruction.
Yeah.
But even those priests, even when they had the temple back in Matthew, they were doing the same thing.
Yeah.
They were leading people not astray. They weren't giving them a chance to understand the word.
Nope.
Same thing. Pretty difficult time.
Huh.
Yeah.
Seems like we still have a pretty direct audience that we're aiming at.
Yeah,
with these stories and the remezes that are just giving us a deeper shovel here.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can extend our shovel just a little bit further. The last one, we got the story of the sheep and the goats, which we love to tell about.
Yeah.
How many times you've probably heard this?
A lot. And that particular type of story, you get the wheat and the tares, you get the weeds and the wheat and the chaff. You get everything again and again and again.
Yep.
Some of it's going to be destroyed. Some of it's going to be overlooked. Some of it will gain favor. You know, it's even more prevalent in the Gospels than the first two.
So let's we have this connection. This one's pretty clear. Maybe the clearest of all of them, Ezekiel 34. Ezekiel 34, and we're going to begin in verse 17.
Hang on. You're coming way forward now.
Yeah. Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel.
Yeah, I got it. What chapter?
34.
You know, 5 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to go forward or back because I wouldn't have had a clue as to where. I mean, that's maybe telling a story on myself, but you know,
it's a growth.
Yeah, it's enlightening to know that I know which direction to go.
Here we go, Ezekiel 34:17. As for you, my flock, thus says the Lord God, behold, I will judge between sheep and sheep, between rams and male goats. Is it not enough for you to feed on the good pasture, that you must tread down with your feet the rest of your pasture, and to drink the clear water, that you must muddy the rest of the water with your feet? And must my sheep eat what you have trodden with your feet, and drink what you have muddied with your feet? Therefore, thus says the Lord God to them, behold, I myself will judge between the fat sheep and the lean sheep, because you push with side and shoulder, and thrust at all the weak with your horns, till you have scattered them abroad. I will rescue my flock; they shall no longer be a prey, and I will judge between sheep and sheep. And I will set over them one shepherd, my servant David, and he shall feed them. He shall feed them and be their shepherd, and I, the Lord, will be their God, and my servant David will be prince among them. I am the Lord. I have spoken. So there's green grass,
clear water,
and clear water. Should be enough for everybody. Should be good for everybody.
Right.
But instead of just eating what's theirs, what do they do with what's left over that they didn't eat? They stomp all over it and trot all over it and make it muddy and nasty. And then they go, oh, you other sheep, you can have some too. And they got to eat the leftovers.
Okay.
Whatever you make available to them. And I provided you with clean water. You didn't have the wherewithal just to drink it and leave it for the next person or offer it to the next person.
You didn't take care of it.
You took care of you.
Right.
But you didn't take care of them. It seems like he even says that he's going to separate the fat sheep from the lean sheep. If I had to guess, which one do you think he prefers? Which one do you think
he would prefer the lean sheep?
Seems as though he's going to care for the lean sheep and nourish them back to health, because
that's what his promise is.
They've been so mistreated and
right.
poorly cared for. And that sounds familiar.
Yeah.
When you saw me hungry, you gave me food.
Yeah. Saw me thirsty.
Gave me a drink.
Right. He uses those examples.
So it seems as though that if we read these three passages as a connection to Matthew 24, we get the same theme rolling over and over again, and we get these, hey, listen, I know you hear this story, but I've destroyed because of unfaithfulness before. I've allowed Nebuchadnezzar to come, and Rome is right down the road.
Right.
And what's going to end up happening historically?
At which time?
About 70 A.D. The
Romans are going to come in and they will destroy the temple.
They're going to destroy the temple.
Right. And a new Caesar is in charge. And it makes it even worse.
Yeah.
For everybody.
Huh. So historically, it's happening.
Right.
Try and tell them, the unfaithfulness has caused a Nebuchadnezzar to be my servant before, and Rome's an option.
Right. Well, it's the most powerful force in the world at the time. Yeah.
And he connects this faithful servant conversation to this story in 2 Kings 22 and says, hey, if you operate with integrity, you'll be trusted. There won't be any question of account. But it seems as though everybody, it's not a great secret that's kept, that the Sadducees are corrupt.
Right.
They're not dealing faithfully with people. Seems like it's still this.
Well, it's like I've said twice now. They've made it hard for the people that want to be faithful faithful, because they're making it more and more difficult for them to be even access to the temple.
So Jesus follows along with saying, hey, those people who were supposed to take care of them, that didn't take care of them,
right,
that were trusted as caretakers but aren't being caretakers.
Yeah.
When you see someone in need, when you see others, how are you caring for them? You're going to be judged by the way that you treat others, the way that you care for others. And it seems that this is an ongoing conversation that is reflective, not just of the end times, but when it comes to the judgment of God.
Yeah.
First of all, is the virgins, like, once you're welcomed in, when the groom comes, the trumpet sounds and the groom comes, you're going to be prepared to be welcomed in. And once you're welcomed in, and the conversation is, hey, now that you're here, what did you do with how faithful were you with what I left for you?
Right.
And then they give an answer for those things that they did and what was done and what account was given for how they dealt with the faith and the trust and the faithfulness that God placed in them. And then the next conversation is separating the faithful for how they cared for people compared to how they didn't care for people.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like a process.
Right.
That it's walked through. And that whole process, that whole conversation of process of these three, the kingdom of heaven is like parables.
Right.
That goes, the kingdom of heaven is like, and then it gets to the end, and then it says then, and it gets to the end, and then it gets to the end. And all these connections that come along with it seem that there's a specific group of people that God is challenging, and it would seem that it's the priesthood, which while we can point at the old priesthood, Peter says, as an echo of the book of Exodus, Jesus says, or God says in the book of Exodus, if you'll have me, I will make you a kingdom of
priests.
So while it's easy for us to point back to the Sadducees and say, this is an indictment of them, this is also a warning for us as a kingdom of priests of how God is calling us and instructing us to live.
He's given us all of this power.
Yes.
All of this knowledge.
All of this, we're being trusted with all of these things.
To lead to the. This is coming back to the conversation that you and I had at noon about the food bank.
Yeah. Just
come and hit me right there.
I mean, just an incredible conversation that we so easily go, this is all end time stuff, but the reality is, like, if we connect a few dots,
it's us.
It's very easily us.
Yeah.
How are we living? How are we caring for others? Are we going to be ready when the groom comes? Are we going to be able to give an account for what has been trusted to us? Are we going to be able to we are going to be judged, whether we like it or not, based on how we treated others, how we cared for others. That's the separation of the goats and the sheep.
Yeah. Well, it's how many people are you bringing along?
Yeah.
If you're caring for them at the right time, if you're using the talents, the gifts, the abilities, the knowledge, the love, the faithfulness, you can bring others along with the word, with anything, just even a little bit. It's like we're saying, 5, 2, and 1. How can you give them the strength to come through with 5 talents, 2 talents, or even 1 talent? How can you bring them through that narrow way to be with you at the end times?
And does it take an extreme?
Take a lot.
Does it take an extreme understanding or some biblical degree
like
to be faithful with?
If you know a little bit about God, then cling to that.
Cling to it.
And then maybe as you grow, you'll be able to understand the 10 Commandments.
Maybe you'll go from trusting God and knowing who God is and knowing His character to actually leaning into His word, and just begin with the simple pieces. Simple instructions of the 10 Commandments, 2 tablets. And try to be faithful in those things. Try to implement those things in your life. Try to continue to honor God in everything that you do. Be faithful in that way, and He'll continue to grow your understanding.
Yeah. Well, we talked about, when did they, and a lot of people bring this up, say, well, I don't have any way to go visit in a prison. But you can talk to a young person that's maybe going down the wrong path and keep them out of prison.
Sure.
You can talk to someone who is desperately seeking just sustenance.
Yeah.
To say, here, I've got a way that you can come and get food.
Yeah.
You can talk to
invest in world missions.
One other person to say, yes, I have some extra clothes and I'll be glad to bring them to you. Or here's a gift, I can give you just this little testimony.
Invest in world missions. Yeah. Commit part of your free time to serving in a food bank or serving at a John 3:16 mission, or at an inner city work, or a cowboy church, or a dude ranch, or like there's the boys and girls homes in one's in Disney and one's in Watts. I mean, these are kids and adults who are going through different rehab, or the women's one of what? Yeah. There's the old orphanage at Shakota that's a women's center. There's a men's center. Is it over by Sepulpa? Like, there's all kinds of places where you can invest in helping people get through and overcome a life that used to be defined by sin, that now they're learning how to define their life by God, and you can be faithful in giving and in caring, because those people are trying to rebuild their life.
Yeah, it doesn't take much to just encourage somebody either.
Yeah.
I mean, don't feel like you have to be.
And it doesn't have to be some amazing act of selflessness. It just has to be a consistent act of trusting God and declaring His word. And if you're faithful in that way, no one will need an account, because all of the fruit of your life will bear witness of your faithfulness.
Right. All you have to do is ask God, show me how I can use my talents, the talents that you gave me.
Yeah.
And He'll show you.
And so, it's a good word. I'm going to close this. Hey, thanks for joining us. We're going to continue to have a conversation here, but you should come and join us sometime in person. This is a great conversation. We're going to move on to chapter 26 next week.
Wow.
We're really flying right now. We're really getting it.
We should be able to get through this book in about 10, 15 years now.
Yeah, we're almost there.
Only 26 books to go.
Yeah. Have a great